I went into Portal Runner on the PlayStation 2 with extremely low expectations. I found the Game Boy Color game to be dreadful, and while I know a PS2 game and a Game Boy Color game are, by default, a far cry from one another, I figured if the Game Boy Color game screws up what should be a winning formula for me, platforming, then what will this screw up? Fortunately though, what I got was the opposite of what I expected. It's not the best game in the series or anything, but it's genuinely fun and significantly better than I expected it to be. The story takes place immediately following the events of Sarge's Heroes 2. General Plastro is in a green jail, the Tan Army is behaving, for the moment, you can never trust plastic Nazis, and Bridget Blue is in hiding somewhere. She's still obsessing over Sergeant Hawk though, with a creepy, "I'll force you to love me" stalker vibe going on. She devises a plan to get what she wants. She sends an anonymous message to Green Plastic News ace reporter Vicky Grimm, Hawk's girlfriend and Colonel Grimm's daughter, telling her that, quote, "the story of your career" awaited her at a not at all ominous location in the middle of nowhere. Having literal plastic for a brain, Vicky goes, and of course she's kidnapped. This naturally lures out Sergeant Hawk, where he too is kidnapped. Vicky is exiled to a different world, one she's never seen before. This isn't the plastic world or the real world. This is a world of dinosaurs. She's trapped as the portal that brought her there was destroyed, but she is not alone. She befriends a lion named Leo. How original. Together, they search for a portal home. This adventure ends up taking them through 3 different worlds. Unlike the other Army Men games on PlayStation platforms, this isn't a strict third-person shooter. You do shoot, Vicky has a bow, and it is in third person, but it's an adventure platformer first and foremost. Yeah, there was a good bit of platforming in Sarge's Heroes, but nothing like this. In those games, the platforming was a feature that livened things up between bouts of combat. In Portal Runner, it's the focus, whereas the combat is a feature that livens things up. Whereas the platforming in Sarge's Heroes felt pretty clunky, it is thankfully pretty smooth here. It's no Crash Bandicoot or Mario, but it's good for a series that epitomizes mediocrity. The shooting is pretty solid too. There's a very strong auto-aim that, while it struggles a little bit with Y-axis aiming, makes X-axis aiming something you barely have to do. Shoot anywhere in a 45-degree arc and you'll probably hit the enemy. That's not to say there's no manual aiming. There is, and you'll have to use it now and then for both puzzles and to hit distant enemies. It's just not how most of your shooting will be done, as was the case in Sarge's Heroes. Speaking of the puzzles, they're not bad. They're pretty rudimentary. There's no Resident Evil tier puzzles here. But they are, for the most part, interesting enough that I didn't get bored with them. The visuals are honestly what most impressed me. That's not to say that it's a visually stunning game, but it is an Army Men game, even if the title doesn't suggest that, so I expected the usual subpar visuals. What I got was exactly what I'd expect from a mid-budget PS2 game. It definitely looks better than Sarge's Heroes 2 and Air Attack 2, and I thought it looked on par or slightly better than Green Rogue. The sound design, while lacking the rad soundtrack of Sarge's Heroes and Sarge's Heroes 2, is solid. The music is good, even if not great, and I don't have much to complain with as far as the sound goes. I'm pretty sure Jim Cummings still voiced Sergeant Hawk, but I can't find anything other than additional voices for his credits for Portal Runner Online, so I can't be sure. Hawk's voice sounded just a little different to my ears, but I don't know if that's actually because it was a different voice actor, or if it's just something weird with his lines in the game's audio. The difficulty modes also were pretty interesting to me. Army Men games, especially the World War games on PlayStation, have usually been pretty difficult towards the end of the game. Maybe 3DO took that feedback on prior games into account, because in addition to the usual easy, normal, and hard difficulty options, there's also an option called Dream, which is essentially the below easy difficulty that usually gets called Story these days. It's stupidly easy on that setting, but if you're just really bad at the game and you just want to experience the story and the environments, it's there for you. As the patron saint of playing on bitch mode, I agree and approve of this setting's inclusion. I'm a little surprised that Portal Runner only came to PlayStation 2. I'm not counting the Game Boy version, it's a totally different game. Every other game, other than the World War sub-series, was on at least one other platform, and a lot of folks have a mental connection between Nintendo and Army Men, with Sarge's Heroes and Sarge's Heroes 2. Since Air Attack 2, albeit with a different title, Sarge's War and RTS are all on GameCube, and Major Malfunction was on Xbox, and if you're in North America, exclusively on Xbox, it just seems an odd choice to keep Portal Runner locked to the PlayStation 2. Green Rogue was only on Sony hardware, but it was on PS1 as well as PS2, and Portal Runner released in 2001. It was a year into the PS2's lifespan, sure, but there were still some games being released for PS1. Regardless though, it is a much better game than I expected. It's not perfect, and the story is a little underwhelming since the main enemies you fight are dinosaurs, knights, and little green men instead of tan soldiers, but it's still a decent Army Men Gaiden sort of story. It doesn't have Army Men in the title, something that will never not irk me, so obsessive-compulsive fans don't need to grab this to put on the shelf next to the other Army Men games. But I do think it's definitely worth a playthrough if you're a fan of the series. I kind of regret waiting so long to actually play this now. This is the only game in the series that wasn't a replay for the review. If you haven't played this, don't deprive yourself. You won't be wondering why it didn't win any Game of the Year awards, but it's definitely not a waste of time. My rating for Portal Runner on PlayStation 2 is a B.